Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Russia claims nuclear-capable missiles have been deployed to Belarus as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz uses his New Year's Eve address to warn of war on Europe's doorstep. More in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Former political prisoners in Belarus ask Warsaw for international protection. Finnish police seize a vessel suspected of damaging an underwater cable. And wild weather hits Poland, closing airports and trapping cars on snow-covered roads. But we begin tonight with Russia's claims that a nuclear-capable missile system has been moved to Belarus. This as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Europe must assert itself to safeguard the continent. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy suggests documents for peace could be ready to sign as early as next month. Joining me in the studio to break all of this down is Kazimierz Świerczak. Good evening, Kazimierz. So, talk me through Moscow's latest move.
Good evening, Aaron. This is the latest escalation from Russia just before New Year's. Moscow reportedly moved hypersonic ballistic missiles Oreshnik to Belarus, Russia's closest ally in Europe and what many call a de facto puppet state. So let's take a look at the map. Here we can see that Russia reportedly moved these hypersonic ballistic missiles to the east of Belarus, according to Reuters, to the former airbase of Krychev. And you can also see some images released by the Russian Defense Ministry reportedly showing the movement of these hypersonic missiles. Now, what's the significance of them? One word: nuclear. They are capable of carrying nuclear warheads. So this is seen as a major escalation. And, well, you can say that they are over there in the east of Belarus, so why should we care? That's because their range is up to 5,500 kilometers. You can see that it clearly can reach anywhere in Europe and beyond. So this is viewed as a major escalation, not only by Ukraine, but also by other European countries. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz gave a New Year's speech in which he focused a lot on the ongoing war in Ukraine and Russia's latest provocation, saying that this war is very much on Germany's doorstep.
This is not a distant war that does not affect us, because we can see it more and more clearly. Russia's attack was and is part of a plan that is directed against the whole of Europe.
And all of that is happening as Ukraine, Europe and the United States are in the middle of peace talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy was in the United States just last weekend, where he met with his counterpart from the United States, Donald Trump. And they were fine-tuning the latest 20-point peace plan, saying that they are very close to reaching a final draft of this peace proposal. And now Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, just after these talks, responded to questions in a WhatsApp chat with journalists, including TVP World, and he told us some more details about what's coming in the year 2026 when it comes to the peace process.
We believe that in January there is an opportunity for meetings with the leaders of Europe, the United States, and Ukraine together. Some documents will definitely be ready for signing in January. This will depend on the capabilities and willingness of the parties to sign. We also raised the question of the meeting with the Russians. I told President Trump and European leaders, I am ready for any format of a meeting with Putin. I am not afraid of any format of our meetings. The main thing is that the Russians are not afraid.
Я сказав президенту Трампу, європейським лідерам, я готовий до будь-якого.
The main thing is that the Russians are not afraid. This sentence from the Ukrainian president is quite crucial here, because just after these peace talks, Russia accused Ukraine of striking one of Vladimir Putin's residences in Russia without providing any evidence for that claim. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia will now revise its approach towards the peace process. This looks like Russia wants to back out of the negotiations as they are accelerating. So meanwhile, while all of that is happening, Ukraine's European partners and other allies are strengthening their support for Kyiv, especially when it comes to the military support. Let's take a look at the next map, where you will see that in the latest development, Romania and Croatia have joined the so-called Pearl mechanism. This is an initiative which means prioritized Ukraine requirement list. This mechanism is based on the principle that Ukraine's partners are purchasing US weapons and then transferring them to Ukraine. This was launched in August, so relatively recently, and already in that time these 22 countries, and now with Romania and Croatia, so overall 24 countries, have purchased weapons for Ukraine worth in total $4.3 billion, with $1.5 billion contributed in December alone. So while these peace talks are happening, while Russia is escalating, Ukraine's allies are standing by Kyiv, making sure that they can fight on. Whether they will have to fight for the entire year in 2026, this remains to be seen. But in the meantime, let's go back to the studio table with Aaron Daman.
Kazimierz Wyszek live in our Warsaw studio. Thank you so much for your analysis. Finnish police have seized a ship accused of damaging an undersea telecommunications cable between Helsinki and the Estonian capital of Tallin. The cable is believed to have been damaged in the early hours of Wednesday morning by a cargo vessel called the Fitberg, which was sailing under the flag of St. Vincent and Grenadines and heading from Russia to Israel. 14 crew members from Russia, Georgia, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan have been detained. It comes after a string of incidents across the Baltic Sea in which cables have been sabotaged, with Finland's President Alexander Stubb saying his country is prepared for the threats and will respond accordingly. In a separate report, a submarine fibre optic line between Estonia and Sweden has also suffered an outage. Almost 24 political prisoners have been pardoned by Russia-ally Belarus as part of Alexander Lukashenko's pattern of a release close to high-profile holidays. But despite 22 people now walking free, more than 1,000 remain behind bars, and some of those let go have been forced to apply for international protection. Randy Potts explains.
Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has signed a decree pardoning 22 prisoners, 15 women and 7 men, in a new amnesty on the eve of the new year. Lukashenko's press office said 20 of the released have been convicted for extremist crimes, a term Belarus uses for political cases. Belarus still has over 1,000 political prisoners. Those prisoners who have been released are still struggling.
You could say we faced a serious challenge, mentally, physically, and morally. Our homes have been destroyed, our flats have been seized, our relatives have either been forced to leave Belarus or have had to find other solutions. Our families have been scattered.
Belarusian opposition politician Franak Viatchorka says the timing of the release is not unexpected, as Lukashenko regularly releases prisoners around the holidays in a display of generosity aimed at the West.
Before big days, Lukashenko regularly releases people. Usually these are less known people. Usually these are people who are about to be released in a few weeks or months. We don't know the names of these people. They're forbidden to talk to press. They're not allowed to leave the country. They're under KGB control. And we don't think there are any big names there.
Earlier this month, Minsk freed more than 100 political prisoners in exchange for the lifting of some U.S. sanctions. They were pardoned and deported through Lithuania and Ukraine. Pavel Sevyarinets, a Belarusian opposition figure freed in the larger release on the 13th, just released this video.
The fact that we were taken out of Belarus is lawlessness, but I believe that we'll definitely return and embrace one another on our native land.
So far, all of the high-profile prisoners released by the Lukashenko regime have been expected to leave the country. As of December 30th, all 83 released Belarusian political prisoners who chose to remain in Poland have applied for international protection. Unfortunately for those prisoners released this week, life after prison is likely to still be very difficult.
Most of these people, they're under rigorous control of KGB even after being released. They have to mark every single day or week in the local police. They are checked. And if they, for example, don't follow the order, or if they in contact with Tikhanovsky or some political structures, they are taken back to prison.
For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Oil prices are on a slippery slope, sliding more than 15% in the last 12 months and falling for a record third straight year. As Maciej Wylowski reports, while consumers are set to pay less at the pump, sanctioned countries like Russia could be hit hard by their dependence on energy exports.
Oil prices sold off in 2025, with the price of Brent crude, the benchmark for oil prices in Europe, down more than 15% over the past 12 months. It was the third straight year of falling prices, the longest streak on record, and a stark contrast to earlier in the decade when the reopening of the global economy from the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine drove prices higher. What drove prices lower in 2025? On the one hand, supply is abundant as major oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia and the US have ramped up production.
We have almost record global production, not just from OPEC plus, but from United States, Brazil, Guyana.
The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, together with partners like Brazil and Russia, raised output by close to 3 million barrels per day this year. At the same time, production in the U.S., now the world's single biggest oil-producing country, hit a record 13.8 million barrels per day in September. And on the other hand, a combination of tariffs, geopolitical uncertainty, and economic weakness in major oil importing countries like China have lowered the demand for oil.
We have also a very important, if not the most important player in oil, as on the demand side, China, which faces economic slowdown, so they will be buying less.
Prices could fall further in 2026. In its latest forecast published earlier this month, the U.S. Energy Information Administration forecasts Brent crude prices will average $55 per barrel next year. That's down from Wednesday's price of close to $62. While lower prices are welcome news for countless drivers around the world who stand to pay less at the gas pump, countries like Russia that are heavily reliant on energy exports could be negatively impacted.
Moscow's finances balance around $75 per barrel. Below that, the government must tap reserves or borrow more.
This could add to the list of economic problems the Kremlin faces, including slowing growth, labor shortages, and Ukrainian attacks on the country's energy infrastructure. With ample supply and lackluster demand likely to continue into next year, oil could be headed for further losses in 2026. Maciej Wylowski for TVP World.
Over in Belgrade, Alexander Vučić is putting Kosovo at the top of his political agenda ahead of Serbia's snap election next year. After repeated student-led protests against the current government and accusations of Vučić forming a hybrid regime, the president is vowing to never give up on the territory, which declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
New year, old wounds. Serbia's President Alexander Vučić made his priorities for 2026 clear in his yearly state address.
I have never given up and will never give up Kosovo and Metohija, even under the most difficult possible conditions.
Kosovo and Metohija, commonly known as Kosovo, declared independence from Serbia in 2008. It is still not recognized by Belgrade and remains a bone of contention in the region. As Vučić says he will not give up Kosovo, he also promises to refrain from the most extreme measures.
I will preserve peace. I will preserve stability. I am not preparing for war.
But his declaration does foretell tensions in the region for the coming year, especially as Kosovo does not regard the current Serbian government as a partner in talks.
We need normalization of relations with Serbia, but it is not easy, because Serbia is not a normal country. It's a hybrid regime.
But Vučić setting Kosovo on top of his government's agenda might be setting a narrative ahead of a decisive vote in the country. After more than a year of student-led anti-government protests accusing Vučić and his Serbian Progressive Party of forming a said hybrid regime, the country will hold snap general elections in 2026.
We have accepted their main request. We will have elections soon, next year. But the protesters won't be so happy when they count the votes. Our victory will be more convincing than ever.
And Vučić might be striking a nationalist tone early to ensure this victory.
Back in Poland, Prime Minister Donald Tusk is urging emergency services to be ready for the worst as the country faces snowstorms and wintry weather. Warsaw's Modlin Airport has already been forced shut, with drivers also facing long delays on a key highway connecting the capital and the Baltic city of Gdansk. Natalia Komarov reports.
This is what you'd want from a sudden attack of winter.
Oh, it's beautiful. We have a bit of snow, some sunshine.
But this is what Polish drivers got instead. Hours and hours on the S7 expressway, one of Poland's most vital arteries connecting Warsaw and Gdańsk. Maintenance personnel fought the elements overnight to make at least one lane drivable in each direction.
We are working to clear the roads up. Currently, we have 4,300 police involved, and further 10,000 officers will join the operations later today.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said all emergency response services must prepare for the worst-case scenario.
I know it's not within human powers to prevent all consequences of bad weather, snowstorms, frost. Sometimes they cause tragedies, but no bad or tragic event can take place due to our oversight.
As the snow blanket grew even thicker, it forced the shutdown of Warsaw Modlin Airport. Hundreds of people were left stranded, and even after the runway was cleared of snow, passengers had to deal with delays.
It was not normal snowfall, but snowstorms and flurries that caused traffic disruptions.
The Polish Institute of Meteorology issued weather alerts across the country, warning of powerful blizzards and sub-zero temperatures.
On New Year's Eve, we expect temperatures to drop as low as -15 degrees in the center, northeast, and east of the country.
Better take that into consideration when planning your New Year's Eve.
We're in the process of removing snow off the roof. I've heard it might get to 60 cm of snow per square meter, so quite a lot.
Stay warm, stay safe, and pay attention to official weather warnings. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Every 365 days, New Year's Eve is a time for family, friends and fireworks. But not everyone finds the long night so joyous, including man's best friend. Hubert Kishel explains.
New Year's Eve, it's a night for meeting up with friends, partying, making resolutions, and for some, the most spectacular tradition, fireworks. The loud blasts and stunning displays bring joy to midnight revelers around the world.
New Year's Eve has long been the day when, at the stroke of midnight, the sky erupts in explosions and colourful flashes of light.
For me, fireworks should be used in many occasions, for example, Christmas, maybe not Halloween, but this big occasion that everybody party.
But not everyone finds the celebrations fun, as city officials, grassroots groups, and everyday people have been pushing to stop the year-end fireworks displays.
When people who are on the autism spectrum experience sudden explosions, they can cause anxiety, significant stress, and reduce their sense of security, sometimes for days on end.
The harmful impact of fireworks has been a focal point for activists working to improve animal welfare during New Year's Eve celebrations.
Some species will try to hibernate, and loud blasts may wake animals up. Startled animals, whether they're mammals or birds, can cause traffic accidents or collide with buildings, causing serious harm to themselves.
And municipal authorities are responding to these calls. Across Poland, many major cities have abandoned large fireworks displays, opting instead for non-invasive and widely accessible light shows, giving animals and people from all walks of life an enjoyable New Year's Eve.
We return now to our top story, Russia's claims of moving nuclear missiles into Belarus and the state of Ukraine peace talks. And joining me for more is Mark Toth, co-founder of Intrep 360. Good evening to you, sir.
Aaron, great to see you. Happy New Year to you and your viewers.
And to you as well. I want to start with Moscow's claims that nuclear Oreshnik missiles have been deployed to Belarus. Is this Vladimir Putin at the sharp end of Ukraine peace talks, proving that he's simply not interested?
Yeah, Aaron, essentially I think what Putin is telling us here is he's panicked. He's very concerned about how this 20-point peace plan that was hammered out in Berlin and then Miami turned out, and that it's not favorable to Russia. And so he's creating all kinds of distractions. First, it was playing the victim card that somehow that he was, his palace at Baltic in Russia was attacked. It wasn't. Unfortunately, just a couple hours ago, President Trump posted a comment from the editorial board of a paper I write for, the New York Post, basically admitting that that just never happened. And now nuclear missiles in terms of Belarus, same thing. When you're running behind in a ballgame, you need distraction. And that's all this is. It's distraction. I'm not concerned about it. For a long time, my colleague, Colonel John Sweet, and I have written that when Putin feels cornered, he pulls out his nuclear weapons as a teddy bear. It mollifies him. He hopes it mollifies the Russian people, but it doesn't have any meaning. Look, NATO has nukes as well. I wouldn't be too concerned about it.
As you mentioned there, Russia also insisting this week that Ukraine has attacked President Putin's palace in Novgorod, the EU calling that claim as well unfounded. What is Vladimir Putin trying to play at when it comes to these kinds of claims? I mean, is he trying to sway Donald Trump? Is he trying to lay the groundwork for potential strikes on diplomatic posts in Kyiv?
Yeah, now, Aaron, another great question. I think there's two things going on here. One is, as I just mentioned, he needed distraction. Things aren't going his way at the negotiating table. He's not getting his maximalist demands. There are things out there that concern him deeply, for instance, U.S. security guarantees, which purportedly would be Article 5-like, the fact that there could be even U.S. troops on the ground, certainly European ones, patrolling any kind of demilitarized zone, and a fairly robust, sizable Ukrainian army at 800,000. Those are things that he's just not willing to accept at this point. And, oh, yes, no clear sense that Ukraine is going to withdraw from those key areas. So I think that's what's happening. But I think also the deeper play here, the thing that intrigues me the most, is it's kind of telling all of us what we need to know about what the future might look like if this deal were to be had. Putin is trying to show that he reserves the right to disrupt any peace process, any peace plan that might be signed by coming up with these fake false flag or type allegations that his, for instance, that his palace was attacked. If he's willing to do this now before the peace deal is signed, what is he going to do after a peace deal if it gets signed? He'll do the same thing because I'm, very clear in my own mind, clear in the articles that I write, that if a peace deal does get done, Putin's going to come back a third time. This isn't going to be peace in any long, meaningful sense of the word.
Let's talk about a potential peace deal, because President Zelenskyy told us that alongside meetings between European leaders and Ukrainian and American advisors, January could also see, quote, documents ready for signing. Of course, it takes two to tango when it comes to this peace deal. How do you read into those comments? I mean, is this about President Zelenskyy proving Kyiv's willingness to Washington, proving to Donald Trump, look, we're not the problem here?
Yeah, no, Aaron, again, not to repeat myself, but another great question for this reason. I think Zelensky's trying to do two things here. One is early on, he got boxed in about potentially ceding territory, not permanently, but at least temporarily to the Russians. That kind of reporting came out earlier today in the New York Times, and it detailed how Ukraine basically was proceed with the U.S. on their side was going to have to be willing to at least temporarily allow certain territories to be under Russian control. I think now what we're seeing with Zelenskyy is that he's trying to box Putin in by getting these wins on the table with Europe and with Trump, be it security guarantees, be it what a post-war economic situation might look like. He wants to get these agreements signed so that they become part of the deal overall, if you will, before Putin even signs off on it, which is going to make it harder for Putin to come back to Trump and say, no, I don't agree with this or that, because Trump's going to say, no, we've already got an agreement here. We need to move forward. So I think two things are happening here. Zelensky's just being smart in terms of how he's clawing back points and getting them hopefully signed in January into agreements. And then he's just boxing Putin into a corner here that Putin is going to have a hard time getting out of.
You mentioned security guarantees. There's been much talk of security guarantees, of course, in Ukraine. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in recent days hinting the US could even put troops on the ground after a peace deal is struck. Is there a world where Washington takes such a great stake and puts its own soldiers at risk in that way?
Look, I hope so. Clearly, Donald Tusk, your prime minister, was the first person, and so far the only one, that has really stressed that point. For a long time, Trump has said that there's not going to be U.S. soldiers on the ground. That clearly is a red line for Putin. He's not willing to accept it. But if we indeed are there, I think that's a very encouraging step, because one of the problems that I've had with these security guarantees, even if they are NATO-like, too many people forget that Article 5 of the NATO Charter is not some kind of automatic trigger. It certainly, starts sounding the alarm bell, but then each member state has the right to figure out how they're going to react to that for any given situation that unfolds. If there are not U.S. troops or a coalition of the willing of European troops inside of Ukraine willing to act at a moment's notice, like there is now on the NATO side of the borders, how long does that take? What kind of Russian provocations would be responded to or not? There's a lot of time delay that might come into play there that could be deadly for Ukraine, were the Russians to attack in force in 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. So from that standpoint, I do think for those security guarantees to have any teeth to them, it's critical that U.S. boots be on the ground along with other NATO partners. I just don't see Putin agreeing to that, and it's just not clear yet from the reporting that Trump has agreed to that either. If it happens, that would be fantastic.
You make a good point with the NATO-style security guarantees, because I guess the question is, will Moscow take any guarantees seriously if they don't include American forces?
Look, I doubt it. I think if it's just simply a demarcation line, a DMZ, if you will, but without any teeth to it, then Putin is going to easily bypass that. And I think he's telling us that's what his intent is. If you look at his side of the negotiating table, he's demanding that you have a fairly weak Ukrainian army. He's demanding that he get all the territories that his armies haven't been able to seize yet, including those key defensive belts in and around the Donetsk area he's not taken, more commonly known as the Fortress Donbass. He's demanding that. He's demanding basically that the U.S. doesn't have these security guarantees that could come into play. Why would you do that? Because you intend to invade again. You don't want those to become obstacles in the future. So I just don't see Putin agreeing to this because, again, he wants all of Ukraine. As I wrote on Christmas Day for the New York Post, Putin isn't interested in peace. He's interested in every single piece of Ukraine, and his negotiating positions today just prove that out, at least to me.
Lastly, in just a few hours, we will be in 2026. We've spoken extensively, of course, tonight, but also across the year about the fact that there's still no peace in Ukraine. Russia's threats on the West and Europe continue. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he's used his New Year's address to warn that the war on Europe's doorstep poses a direct threat to the continent's freedom. I want to ask you, is there any doubt now that what happens with Ukraine will set the stage for what happens with Europe?
Aaron, I do. As you and I have discussed, in the past, Putin's intent here is bigger than just Ukraine. It also involves the Baltic states. It involves Poland. It involves, as Lavrov just pointed out, any state that joined NATO after 1997. Now, while he was a bit vague with his wording that he just wants NATO to reset its borders back to pre-1997, that would mean half the organization is gone, including Poland, for all intents and purposes, or at least there could be no NATO troops in your country. That would just badly expose Poland to a future Russian attack, or through, a Belarusian aggression as well. And that's just not acceptable, nor is your country going to accept it. There's no way. You know what it's like to live as a country under Soviet rule, and you're not going to accept that in the modern day times under Russia's rule, because it would just be a rinse and repeat situation. So I do indeed think that every person in Europe needs to understand that this is indeed a situation where if Ukraine loses, Europe loses. That doesn't mean you lose the war. That doesn't mean all is lost. But you'll be in a very serious predicament at which it's not clear if the U.S. is going to back you up in that. So I think this fight is now. The fight is in Ukraine. Europe has to win it. It's got to do whatever it takes to do that, including if you have to go on a war footing. And I don't mean that from a military standpoint, but just an economic standpoint, to make sure that Ukraine has all the 155 millimeter artillery that they need, all the weapons that they need, all the logistical support and the intel that they need. I think you're there, and I think you ought to take 2026 very seriously. And thankfully, much credit to Poland, you guys are taking that lead. You've consistently articulated that message, and you've made that warning to all of Europe. I hope they listen to you.
Mark Toth, co-founder of Intrep 360. Thank you so much for your time, especially on New Year's Eve, and thank you for all your contributions over the course of the year.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Aaron, sorry about that. Happy New Year to all of you and your viewers. Cheers.
And that's all for World News tonight. I'm Aaron Darman. Have a very good evening indeed, and a happy New Year. I'll see you in 2026.